been a pushover on your line. Hey everybody, welcome to Love My Tool TV. We got some great people today, and we have Denny back. He has not been demised a bit. He's still here, and we got some great guys from Viavi. And so, Denny, I'll let you introduce everybody and get it started. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to do my best imitation of Tony today. Okay. So, so I'd like to welcome some old friends, Steve Brown. Steve and I go way back. I don't know if he remembers, but we go way, way back. I remember
we go way back to many interops ago. When interop was a very relevant thing in our industry.
Welcome to the show. Steve is the solution marketing director of solution marketing for Viavi. Steve used to be with Network Instruments, and then he also has his colleague Warren, who's a solution engineer. Steve, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and Warren for me, and then kind of give us a background a little bit in case people who I guarantee you our audience know more about Network Instruments. They know about your new company. So
absolutely. So yeah, and they'll know the Observer performance management platform, Gigastore, the hardware appliance dedicated for back-in-time analysis and troubleshooting for performance issues. So as Denny, as you mentioned, we go way back, probably almost 10 years now, and started out with Network Instruments, and Network Instruments within the product marketing side was involved there, and Network Instruments about 2 years ago was bought out by and merged with JDSU. And JDSU, you may know from their handheld testers. They also help to build some of the largest carrier networks in the world. You name it, Verizon, BT. And with that, we split apart as a part of being public, and we had two sides of the house, and so now we have Lumentum, which is focused on optical manufacturing, and then there is the Viavi side, which is focused on more the telecommunications networks, again, largest telecom providers globally, and the enterprise, and that's the side that Warren and I are focused on. Warren as an engineer, and me in product marketing. So, and then I can let you know anything else that you'd like to regarding our products or the solutions that we and how we help people.
Okay. So what would you like to? You got some exciting news with your product. What would you like to talk about today?
So I think the biggest thing that I really wanted to kind of focus on was we're getting close to the holiday time when people are taking off and maybe letting their guard down a little bit on their networks. And this is, I know, something that Tim can relate to, was actually wanting to look at really strategies for utilizing. One of the things that we deal a lot with in the performance realm is traffic capture and traffic analysis for performance. But also understanding that in capturing literally every conversation that goes by, that plays a really valuable role in security investigations, understanding that who, where, when, and what. And a lot of times I think that network people may overlook the value of traffic in that. And so, as we're going into the holiday season, it's a great time to keep your guard up, especially given that hackers never stop. They don't really know a holiday or time off, as I'm sure you guys could probably all attest to.
Absolutely.
So
it's but trying to get people, even Tony and I talk about this all the time, trying to get people to do even a simple baseline becomes a critical evaluations modality. If you know even what your TCP IP address span is, or why are my servers peaked up to 100% at 4 a.m, and there's only one person logged in, and their IP address is 47.1.3.3. Those are suspicious events, and if you don't have a baseline, you can't even begin. But I'm all with you. We got to start getting people thinking about, because as you say, hackers never rest, and when you're at home asleep, They're not. So go ahead, Warren. Once you talk, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that that's really one of the things that needs to occur both on the performance management side of the house as well as the security side of the house, which is really understanding how do we shift from a reactive standpoint, so pulling the tools off the shelf after something's happened, to more proactive, whether that be proactively, Tim, like you had said, baselining your network for performance or security understanding. And also, I guess that would be my question to you guys is, what types of, in addition to baselining, steps should end users be taking to become more proactive in their management of threats and anomalies on the network?
Absolutely. Warren, why don't you jump on that and tell us what you see?
So what we see in the industry is the need for people to be able to go back in time when they have security threats. When something happens, and whether or not the IDS detects it or not, to be able to go back, pull the packets, be able to see where all the traffic came from, because packets don't lie, as we all know. Be able to investigate what's going on, who did what, and when. And if we have an ability to proactively do that, that's even better. You brought up an example of at 4 o'clock in the morning, if you see a spike in your call volume or whatever it happens to be, that's great. But what if you could alarm on that? What if you had a set of baselines that ran in the background, and every hour or so, or every half an hour, it's executing something that says, check this baseline while you're sleeping, to be able to send you an email or some type of alert that says, hey, by the way, you have traffic volume 10 times higher than what you normally see. So you might want to investigate that, because even though IDSs and firewalls and whatnot are becoming better and better all the time, they can still miss things. And if you're capturing traffic right off the wire, you're going to see it regardless, because it's something that is actually there. It's not, trying to run through an algorithm. It's not trying to detect it through port interfaces and whatnot, but it's on the wire, very clear, very visible. Just have to have the tools to be able to look at it, and that's what Viavi is trying to bring to is bringing to market, is able to give to its customers as a way to understand not only their network better and troubleshoot issues and reduce mean time to repair, but to also integrate with security and help our customers be more secure.
Yeah, and that's what, to me, baselining is all about, understanding your network. Because when you go to the doctor, the first thing they do is take your blood pressure, take your temperature. There are norms. Now, in networking, there are no norms until you establish them. And I do a lot of teaching, and I tell people that, and I still have my mock-up of my Gigastore that I've had for, God, Steve, how many years has that been? 7, 8 years now?
About 7.
Yeah. And I always show people, you got a tap, you got a Gigastore, and you got some visibility methodology. And the nice thing is being able to go back and prove in a courtroom, if someone's trying to sue you, that the breach wasn't your fault. Okay. And that you did what was the very best you could to stop the data leak or the breach from the moment you recognize it. And that helps you and helps your insurance companies keep you away from large fines.
Yeah. Actually, Tim, the first thing they do when you go to a doctor's office is to check to see if you have insurance. That shows you how important baselining is.
Yeah,
it's so interesting that you bring that up, because I was talking with a customer this morning, and they want to use our tools to be able to verify if their ACLs are working properly. And it's a great way to do it. You can see traffic before the ACL and after the ACL, baseline it and understand exactly what's happening on both sides of it to see, okay, yeah, we are actually not securing the network through the ACL because this type is still getting through. So it's a great way to be able to catch whatever's happening. And as you mentioned about prosecuting, if you've got the packets, you can bring those packets to whatever bureau investigates that and prosecute who's actually hacking a network, whether it be within our own country or outside.
Yep. Yeah, and baselining is really relatively simple, but you have to establish those parameters and stick to them. So anytime something is aberrant, and I tell people all the time, people tell me, well, I'm going SDN. I don't have to worry about visibility, or I don't have to worry about firewalls. And I'm like, no, what you've done is you've taken, now they only have one target they can go after and own your network. And I've had people say, well, I've got SDN. I don't need visibility. Uh-oh, you're wrong. If anything, you need more visibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of this hype about new technology all goes back when I was at Network General. Well, back in the 70s when we were building data scopes for RS-232 and V35 and V22, we did the same thing. We baselined everything, how long a transaction took. And, it was harder to do because you had to do it with stopwatches and calculate, bit times and all that. But you still did it. And that's how we've always tested stuff, even going back to, back in the old days when, in the 1700s, the scientists would baseline an event, whether it was celestial or, transitional. And and baselining is great, but having that ability to go back in time and say, ruh-roh, this guy's using a password that belonged to Steve that we fired 3 years ago, or not yet, Steve, whichever way.
Yep. Well, there are plenty of Steves roving the world.
Yeah,
another thing I was thinking about was just the role that understanding where devices are located on your network, understanding not just from a baseline perspective, but from a locational perspective, where traffic is coming, what should be communicating with what, whether you're doing that through some sort of application mapping, paying attention to traffic trends, but so that way you can identify anomalous traffic. Either, I didn't realize that we had an office in Belgium or China, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of traffic, or you've got different servers that are now sending out loads of emails that shouldn't be, or you've got an overly chatty printer, and how would you identify that? And what do you think the best ways for identifying that type of traffic is?
Go ahead, Warren. I'll give you.
Okay. If you've got a chatty printer, good way of finding that is actually through its MAC address, because it'll show up, as an HP printer, pop on right there. As far as different IPs around the world, fortunately, if they're not being masked or bounced around, we can identify that pretty fast. And I think the key thing in a lot of these is, depending on the type of attack that you might be seeing, is you've got a lot of TCP sessions open. That's a good thing to look at, and that'll give you a good handle on it. But yeah, just being able to identify and see, I didn't know that we had, some users in China. It was funny, because that's actually a real world example that you bring up there, Steve, is a year or so ago, I was using one of our products called Apex, and, I was mapping out where an IP address was. I was like, we have an office in Beijing? Really? And as it turned out, we did. It was funny because I didn't know about it, but as it turned out, we did. And I caught another one from Ukraine, and I said, I know we don't have somebody in Ukraine. But actually, there was someone legitimately logged in who was in Ukraine at the time into the network. But it's a great thing. It's a great tool to be able to investigate and find out what's going on.
Yep, and I think that's an important thing, is to not just be aware of performance, but be aware of where the clients, where the service, where that communication is coming from, and is this something that you would expect to be a normal part of activity on your network, or is this something that should be questioned and maybe investigated further? And that's also one of the advantages of having all the packets is, you can use the tools that you would normally use, whether that be some sort of monitoring, security incident event manager, or an ITS and IDS, or another network performance monitoring tool. And you can always go back to the packets, take those off, and assuming that your solution supports either BFR or PCAP, analyze them within whatever tool you're used to analyzing them, or we can additionally also provide that type of network and application and infrastructure perspective, that additional context that can make the difference of either identifying, nope, this is a false positive, or great that I was cautious, it turned out to be nothing, or if you need to understand what's been compromised, that you've got that. And Tim, I know that you're one that's definitely spent a large amount of time for security reasons in the packets. relate to some of those examples.
Yeah, and my favorite one was a guy one time said, I asked him for a dependency chart. He didn't know what I meant. And so what I wanted to know was how many IP addresses you had on each switch port and all this. And after quite a bit of packet digging, on one port on his 3500X switch, he had 741 IP addresses. And I'm like, that defeats the reason of having a switch. You're sending packets to all these, and it may be the very last guy in line gets them, but everybody else has got to look at them. And what had happened is someone that worked there had created a virtual world out there that looked like he had several hundred IP addresses. And
wow.
Of course, that he left the company and he was using that as a portal through a Wi-Fi into the network. And nobody knew it because no one had ever baselined it. And I think I lost Steve. I'm sure he'll call back. But if you, Steve, did I lose you?
Anyway,
I'm calling back. Go ahead.
Warren, you want to fill in? So what's the can we get some specific examples of customers that you visit that you think that really helps us tell a story here today?
Well, I prefer not to use, names and whatnot of customers, just because, a lot of folks don't really appreciate that. We have a large regional bank, for example.
Yeah, this is what I usually do when back in the days when Steve and I were working together. I would go in and says, well, I can't name the company, but they had just invented this MP3 player that you just, it's named after a fruit.
Named after a fruit. Oh, you must be talking about orange. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so, yeah, that's it. Whatever.
And so I'll give you actually a really great example of baselining and how we're using that to help out this customer. So they came and large regional bank, they get, 10,000 simultaneous calls throughout their business day. So we were helping them deploy a VoIP monitoring solution for those calls. And we were on the phone and their VoIP guys were like, listen, what we're really scared of is people making calls during the nighttime and us not knowing about it, because those calls aren't real calls. Those calls are to hack the network, using mobile devices to be able to establish a phone call and then hack in from there. So what we really need to know is we need to know what our baseline is, not only during the day, but we need to see it at night. And if we see a spike, anything above baseline, because we get 10,000 simultaneous calls, all day, 8 to 8. But after that, we should only be seeing just a few calls, and we see some kind of spike there. That's what's important, because they wanted to make very clear that, if they wanted to make sure that we could alarm on something that was, 500 calls at night or after 8 o'clock. But that same call volume, obviously, during the day could be, really high. And we assured them that, our baselining takes into account time of day and whatnot. And that was specifically used to help them catch hackers, to catch people who are trying to infiltrate their banking systems. So obviously, really high on their priority list. That was their number one thing they wanted, was a baseline of calls coming into the network.
Cool.
So
remember
that's the first breach that happened. That was what was that? That was like 6 months ago. So that's a very relevant example that I've got for y'all.
Do you remember the big bank breach last year where they sold billions of dollars all around the world? If even one of those banks had a monitoring system like you offer, they would have noticed that at 2 and 3 in the morning, someone was downloading control information to their ATMs, which were producing outputs of thousands of dollars and there was transfers of money going on at 3 and 4 a.m. If they even had a fundamental baseline, they would have been able to say that's aberrant traffic. But yet the breach went on all of these banks around the world for a year plus.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, we're coming up on the half-hour mark. Instead of waiting for Steve, I wonder if you could help us by kind of summarizing the Viavi company for us, because it's very new to many of us. The name is very new.
The name's new, but the technology's not. It's a hell of a company. I knew Douglas when he started the company. I used to make him mad by calling him Dougie, but but he was he had an incredible thought process. And unfortunately, in the very early days, people tried to compare pineapples to strawberries and made his product look bad. But in fact, it wasn't. It was an incredible product. Matter of fact, I have it right there on my bookshelf, and I still use it. I tell everybody about it. I've got it at several universities here. But I'm going to let you finish it up there, Warren, about it, because
sure,
from a technical perspective, the company has grown immensely.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. I'm glad you guys brought this up, because the transformation that has happened since from network instruments to JDSU to Viavi is really actually an important one, because so Network Instruments operate on its own as a private company, and then was bought by JDSU, which anyone in the telco world knows about JDSU, because they were the guys who made the lasers that went into the fiber network stuff. They make the ink for counterfeiting. They also sold all the T-Birds and whatnot, all the fiber testers, all the RAND advisors and all that other stuff that JDSU is super well known for. And then they buy this Network Instruments business unit to go after enterprise space, right? To go after the Fortune 1000s, to chase after their network infrastructure needs. So a year after JDSU bought Network Instruments, Wall Street said, you guys are very, very diversified. As a matter of fact, we don't know how to understand your business because you cover this broad spectrum. So what JDSU decided was they were going to split the company and create two new companies. Viavi, which is the organization that I work for, and Lumentum. Lumentum got all the lasers, is the microelectronics and the lasers. Lumentum got, and we got everything else, including the Network Instruments business unit. So this is just a part. It's the enterprise part of Viavi Solutions. And if we were to take of what it is that we really want to accomplish as Viavi, it would be, we want to help people deploy their networks, manage their networks, reduce MTTR as always, and optimize them. And we do this through packet capture, through analysis of those packets, and through trending information from those packets, to be able to allow people to understand baselines, to be able to allow people to understand the troubleshooting on their network and fix things, and to help them deploy new solutions. As we look at things like cloud deployment, because everybody's moving everything to the cloud, we have a solution for that as well, where we can go in and interrogate AWS's cloud, Azure's cloud, and be able to give people the visibility that they need to make those big decisions of, do I lay down $1 million out to Amazon to get all their services? Do I do a hybrid IT solution where I'm part in the cloud, part in my data centers, which is actually the most common one, right? Very few people are 100% cloud, and no one is 100% prem anymore. So Viavi is here to help customers and help companies navigate these waters, troubleshoot their network, provide visibility, and in the end, affect their bottom line in the positive.
That's excellent.
So,
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Tim, we're going to close the show. So give us your last word. We're closing down for the holidays as well, but we got a great show coming up next week too, right?
Yep, we got Paul Alford is going to come in and talk about their new extensions and some of the new products are adding up to his system. Again, it's another monitoring tool. And I tell people all the time, don't get caught up in tools. Look at what your need is. Find the product that best solves your visibility need. If you don't understand it, it is not going to do you a damn bit of good.
That's right.
So understand what it does. Go for the strength in that area, and deploy it. Don't be shy about trying things and asking why is, every time that Joe Blow access the server, it takes 3 hours and 22 minutes. Ask questions, learn what's normal.
Yeah. I guess
again, like
it's like Tim, it's like the old saying, right? If you don't know where you want to go, you will never get there, regardless of tools that you have, right?
That's right.
Either that, or whenever you get there, you'll be happy because it didn't matter how you got there, right? I mean, it's like I got there, but I don't care because I don't know where it's at.
Right.
But yeah, you got to look. You got to get creative. Networks are getting more complex. I'm not a fan of the cloud. I'm not a fan of taking.
Well, you were not a fan of the Abacus, if I remember correctly.
and again, if you're going to get a good device, like the Viavi tools, please don't abuse a tool by saying that, oh, I'll just use a span port to capture the data, or even worse, RSpan or VACL. Get a tab. Capture the data in relative time. That way you see everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay?
Yep.
And trust me, if you don't look at it all, you're not informing yourself very well.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, for those of you out there who are curious, we don't sell tabs here. We just sell the obvious. And what Tim said is the obvious. So anyway, thank you, Warren. Thank you for coming on the show. I do want to thank Steve. Thank Steve as well. We just had a little bit of technical difficulty. We apologize for that. And with that, we'll bid you goodbye, and we'll see you next week. And Warren, come back soon, okay?
Great. Happy holidays, everyone.
Everybody have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Tim.
Be safe, y'all.
Okay, bye-bye.
Virtually.
Okay,
Great
bye-bye.
to meet you guys too. Bye.
God bless all.